Welcome to Tripwires for Lawyers and Law Students, Practice Traps for the Unwary, sponsored by the American Bar Association. Moderating the program today is Kathy Morris. Kathy is founder of Under Advisement Limited and former Director of Career Counseling and Placement for Northwestern University School of Law, former Director of the ABA Career Resource Center, and the Center for Continuing Legal Education. Kathy has decades of experience with guiding law students, lawyers, and law firms, focusing on attorney training and professional development. Kathy, you may proceed with the program.
Thanks, Rebecca. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you back with us for our second Friday of the month Career Advice Live series. We've got a very, very important and interesting program for you today. And let me get right to telling you who the faculty members are. You see their bios on screen. Jim, you'll hear and know during the program, is Jim Grogan's a wonderful speaker and a lawyer whose entire career has been about the traps and the tripwires that lead lawyers astray. He's Deputy Administrator and the Chief Counsel of the Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission, which here we call the ARDC, and he's a past president of the National Organization of Bar Counsel. As well, Jim's a longtime and truly well-loved legal ethics professor. Debbie Stone practiced law at the large law firm of McKenna Long and through her own firm, and was a management consultant at Bain & Company. And Debbie is now a certified accredited coach and the founder of Novateur Partners. She also provides training to lawyers in self-promotion, communication skills, professional presence, goal setting, leadership, and other subjects. So we're lucky to have them today. And again, I'm your series moderator, a career advisor for lawyers and law students through my counseling practice Under Advisement. If you've been with us before, you know that the program agenda has certain components. First, we'll have a faculty discussion, and please feel free at all times to type in and send us your questions because we want to take questions throughout the program, not just wait till the end. And we'll also then get to some quick tips to change the pace of the programs, the agree-disagree moment where I toss out a concept and the faculty either will agree or disagree and quickly say why. Again, we'd like to take more questions and then end up with some real takeaways that'll give you concrete thoughts and tips and suggestions of things you can do after the program as well. And I'll mention the ABA resources that are always a part of our series. If you missed programs in the past, they're archived, and I'll tell you at the end of the program where you can also find them. And so we're going to kind of jump right in, if everyone's ready, to the faculty discussion. These are the main questions we're going to go over today. And I have an observation, and then I'm going to toss out my first question. I think that some of the common and the kind of the fairly obvious tripwires that lawyers encounter and when appropriate law students as well include failing to communicate regularly and effectively with people's clients and with their supervisors and colleagues. I think, Jim might tell us, and I'll ask him later if that's true, that, these are the most common areas, this lack of communication that lawyers, trip over. But let me ask Debbie and Jim, what are some of the less obvious pitfalls that people step into too often?
Well, one of the most hidden tripwires, this is true for lawyers at any phase of their careers, whether very seasoned or brand new lawyers, is being passive in their careers, waiting for other people to give them assignments that they want, responsibility, promotions, raises, and this is just not an effective way of taking ownership in a career. This is true whether you're a solo practitioner or someone in a large firm. For solos, it shows up in terms of actively marketing and seeking clients for people who are in firms and organizations. It's about proactively seeking out mentors and opportunities. And I like to think of a career as similar to a safe deposit box where you as the person in your career have one key and the organization or your client base holds the other key. You simply can't wait for them to open the door. You need to bring your key and take the proactive steps to make sure that both keys are available to unlock the steps to your career.
I would agree with you, Debbie, wholeheartedly, and I'd add it also that it's so vital that not only people be able to get clients, but to keep clients, because so much of the business that's generated from lawyers comes from good word of mouth, where people say, I was impressed with this person. This person really looked me in the eye, told me what I needed to do, gave me great advice. And one of the lesser-known tripwires that's becoming a big problem is, if you will, an over-reliance on technology. Technology is a beautiful thing, but I've got to ask everybody out there, have you gone to a restaurant recently and looked at a table of people and see where their eyes are directed? Many people, they spend their time looking into their laps. That's not something that should be done during the course of a meeting with clients or a meeting with supervisors. So you have to be able to know when to use the technology, when to put things away. It's a tripwire if you always rely on it. And it's important to understand that there are generational differences in which the ways people communicate. I graduated from law school, it feels like, in 1910. I'm very, very comfortable with voicemail. I'm very comfortable with email. I don't really want to deal with other modes of communication, and a lot of people in management positions at firms and corporations are similarly situated. So you have to be able to understand what's the most appropriate mode for communication with colleagues, with supervisors, and with clients, so that we can be able to communicate effectively. I'm a great believer. If someone will shoot me an email, I deal with the press a lot, so I deal with a lot of journalists, and I'll get an email from a journalist, and I will, if they haven't provided me with a phone number, shoot back almost immediately, what's your phone number? I want to talk to people. I want to communicate to people. You can't always do that. You can't always walk down a hall and see a person and speak, but even a voicemail allows you to understand intonation and understand where the other person's coming from. So, sometimes if you read something in bloodless black and white in an email, it really doesn't express what the intent of the party is in reaching out. So I would say an over-reliance on technology, especially in terms of communication, can cause problems.
That is so true, and I think that there's a tripwire in itself in terms of emailing, because there's more misdirection of emails than we would think, and that can be a huge problem. So one of the things we say is, watch out for that reply all button. It's a tripwire in and of itself. And sometimes we say, write an email and then address it when you're done, so you don't have a worry about something going out more quickly than you were ready. This is, something that Jim sees in terms of emails, that include language they shouldn't, but that go to the wrong parties. It's a huge problem, right, Jim?
Oh, wait, not only it's a regulatory concern. By what I mean by a regulatory concern is everyone, knows there's a rule that governs confidentiality, and a slip of misdirection can cause you to reveal information about your client that, at least in theory, can get you into disciplinary trouble, but even more so can really cause some big malpractice concerns. So it's almost like whenever you're going to send anything out, and I try to do this, I count to 10 before I hit send. You got to look at it. You got to look at the address. You got to look at the attachments. You got to look below and see, hey, do I want all those strings appearing? Count to 10. Look over everything before you hit send.
Yeah, so often people say, here's the document, and then they don't, and then they have to come back with an oops. And, it's not the biggest tripwire trap in the world, but it just doesn't boost, sort of your stature, presence, et cetera. So, you ought to be a person that tries to avoid that all the time. And so I think here we're talking to our participants about some traps and tripwires involved in passivity, and then there's some traps and tripwires involved in taking action or initiative. And Jim, you mentioned confidentiality. I think the next area I'd like us to maybe think about is not confidentiality, but showing confidence. I think that's another aspect of what you guys are alluding to in some of these thoughts, and I'd like to have your thoughts about tripwires as to sort of showing or not showing confidence.
Well, if you don't mind, I can start with that because I've seen in real life really big problems caused by people that try to put too much on their own shoulders, too confident, not confiding in others, especially when a mistake's made. Because, you know, if you make a mistake, you have to deal with it, and things can get messed up really bad if you see something and you don't communicate effectively with your colleagues or your supervisors or, you know, people in your corporate in-house division, you know. But a lot of times people say, hey, I've been an overachiever all my life. If I make a mistake, I'm going to clean it up on my own. And I say that because there was a lawyer, and this sticks in my mind, came in to meet with me, and he represents lawyers in trouble and has for many years. He's a former assistant U.S. attorney. And he said, I have a self-report. This is somebody who I'm representing now who has to report himself. He was at one of the country's largest law firms and went to great schools. And they loved him as an associate at this firm. He made a mistake. Some documents came into his office. They were misfiled. They weren't located until after the time they should have been filed with the IRS. So what the lawyer did in a panic without consulting anyone was he backdated documents and had them filed. And eventually the client said when copies of what was filed with the IRS were returned to them, they said, wait a minute, we didn't sign them on this date. What went on? The firm had to look into it, and what they found out is, yes, indeed, he had backdated these. So they basically had to terminate their relationship. They basically said, you report yourself or we report you, so he reported himself. But the sad thing that his lawyer related to me was, you know, all the lawyers loved this guy in the firm. And if he had just come to him and said, I made a mistake, you know, I just dropped the ball, they said, oh, we make mistakes all the time, and we've done this before, and this is, you try to avoid it, but this is how you can do it, no problem. We'll write to the IRS, and we'll say we made a mistake, and they'll accept it. They've accepted it in the past. So what I'm trying to say is, you know, don't put too much on your shoulders or take too many matters into your own hands because we know a lot. You know, getting our law licenses, we know a lot, but we don't know everything. It takes a lot of years to understand all the nuances.
Yeah, and you know, this is good advice, Jim, whether a person has 100 files or one client, you know, that one sort of error by perhaps being overconfident or at least trying to, you know, take everything into their own hands can, you know, have huge negative ramifications. And you mentioned something about this lawyer, and they said to him, if you just come to us, we knew the IRS would accept this. We've seen it in the past. I especially want to say to the law students who are on the call with us and who are on their way to summer jobs, you know, there's such a wealth of knowledge and experience that you're going to encounter and the people that you're going to be working with, and it's really important to you know, communicate as opposed to, you know, not. And Debbie, what's your thought on this business of overconfidence, underconfidence, et cetera?
I absolutely agree, Kathy, with what you and Jim have said, that it's critically important to take personal responsibility and to communicate about something when you don't feel confident or you know you've made a mistake. At the same time, there is a tripwire on the other side, which is being seen as lacking in confidence. And as a coach, I have many times been hired by organizations and law firms to work with lawyers who simply don't get seen as having the amount of professional presence that they need to be taken seriously for a partnership or for a promotion or to be taken seriously by clients. And so it's a trap because it's almost a circle if you think about it as you take actions and get good results, which increase your confidence. And by having confidence, you get the opportunities to take action that then you can get results on that increase your confidence. So it's a little bit of inside and a little bit of outside in terms of getting and showing confidence. Some people have a soft speaking voice or maybe an unconscious habit. Hair twirling is one of them. Fingernail biting is another. Not making eye contact. All of those kinds of things lead to a mistaken, perhaps, feeling on the part of people who see you that you don't have confidence. And in order to be successful as a lawyer, confidence and presence are really important. It's the gravitas that you have, the ability to be taken seriously. That's really what gravitas means. And that doesn't mean always being serious. You can still show a sense of humor and a personality, so it doesn't mean you can never smile. But being able to be taken seriously, being seen as someone who is trustworthy, who's confident, without being over the top. Nobody feels a whole lot of trust in someone who appears to be overconfident, but someone who appears to be competent in what they're doing. So you want to develop that sense of professional presence, but at the same time be yourself, so that when you connect with a client, when you connect with your boss, when you connect with someone who might be a referral source for you, that they see you as someone that they can trust with legal issues.
You know, it's interesting, Debbie, because we see a lot of, I guess I'll say especially new lawyers who, their frame of reference, if they don't have lawyers in the family, is, maybe even what they see on TV, or there's sort of this sort of caricature of how a lawyer should speak with, kind of the formal legalese, or we've all, kind of been in school with the person who's a little boastful or arrogant, who kind of raises their hand all the time and, doesn't listen, enough, speaks too much. Kind of this it factor. And like everything else, it's kind of finding the line where you're someone who can step up to responsibility, kind of be seen as a go-to lawyer no matter what stage you're at, in the group or, in your town. And so I guess that raises a point to me that I want to ask about. Some of these tripwires are internal. They're in your office, in the office, and there can be traps that are outside of your practice area or your workplace. And so let's ground this. Let's stick with the spectrum of confidence issues for a minute. Just so I would like Debbie to perhaps for our audience highlight an internal trap about lacking confidence, and then Jim, a trap that can be external in the effort to show that you do have confidence. Debbie?
Sure. So an internal trap related to confidence is this whole idea of self-promotion and whether you feel comfortable talking about who you are and what you bring to the table, and making sure that the right people, either within your organization or potential clients, know what it is that you offer and what it is that makes you stand out as a lawyer. And this is one of the ways that we stop ourselves from having presence or from being seen as powerfully as we can be. So it's really important when you're thinking about confidence. None of us wants to be the over-the-top, obnoxious braggart type person. At the same time, it's critical that people around you know what it is that you're doing. So one of the ways to do that might be by keeping track of your time that you spend in business development, really being careful as you submit your timesheets and work on bills that it's clear what you are doing for a client, so that people, whether they be clients or whether they be the people that you're working with, are apprised of what you're doing and how you're doing it and where your successes are. I had a client recently who said that they were working in a large firm environment and that it was an associate. Most of the partners that this associate worked for were in offices in other cities. And so it was almost impossible for the partners to know on a day-to-day basis what this associate was accomplishing and doing. So one of the things that this associate instituted was a weekly check-in with each of the partners that this person was working with, to have the opportunity both in writing and by phone, to touch base on some of the things that were going on, some of the successes that this person had. And it was a way of conveying both confidence and competence without being over the top or obnoxious, and allowing those who needed to know what this person was accomplishing to really give them the information that they needed to make important decisions.
All right, that helps. Let's stick with that a minute before Jim gives us an external example, because we had a couple of questions here from the audience, and one was sort of broad. I think we may have covered it about, can you please expand on what you mean by professional presence? But maybe this flip side question will help that person too, because there was a question that said, what is the best way to deal with a coworker who tries to self-promote by undermining colleagues with negative, unfounded comments, and seems to be kind of effective in doing so? That's an interesting question when you're telling people, Debbie, to self-promote. What happens if somebody else is sort of over-promoting themselves around you, and and maybe even trying to, I don't want to say throw you under the bus, but be negative, taking all the glory type of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question, and certainly you never want to get into a tit for tat of I can promote myself better than you can promote yourself kind of place. At the same time, the best way to counter somebody who's promoting themselves with negative or unfounded comments is by making sure that you are communicating accurate information in a timely manner. Because if the people around you know what you're doing, how you're doing it, and the successes that you have, and they know it from you directly in a timely manner, then that is going to be more powerful information than any other information that they're receiving about you from someone else.
So stick to the facts when you need to get to something like that's happening around you. Jim, what thought on that? And also,
I want to just remark, Kathy, that Robert had a very good question here about professional presence, and it goes back to what Debbie was talking about, image. Now, a lot of times when you say, oh, image, that's just superficiality, I just wear a suit. No. It's really critical, because we are perceived as lawyers as being professionals, and we have to, basically have our clients have an image of us of trust, and if you will, an image, that I'm someone that, I'm someone that looks like I could drop everything, go into court, and a judge would listen to me. I'm going to be dressed in a certain way. I'm going to speak in a certain way when I'm in a courtroom environment. Those things are very, very critical. And I will tell you, one of the biggest and growing areas of concern nationwide is, how does a lawyer deal with negative reviews? And let's talk externally now, because Debbie talked about the internal issues, where you've got someone stepping on your feet. How do you deal with that in the law firm environment? But what happens if you're the sole proprietor and you spend a lot building your practice and trying to develop it, and a client posts a negative review on you on a lawyer review site? How do you deal with that? This is a huge problem throughout the country. We're seeing some growth of disciplinary cases where that lawyer attempts to protect her image by essentially responding to the client, saying, that's not right. Here are the facts of the situation, facts of the situation. You shouldn't be talking in a public forum about what you've been doing for clients. You have the rules of confidentiality, so you have to be very, very careful with that. And what I've noted is a lot of lawyers, where there might be a negative review, what they try to do is post a response, for example, that doesn't discuss specific matters, but just generally says, I'm sorry that this that you have these opinions. I always take the time to meet with clients, to talk out any concerns. If you'd give me a call, I'd be more than happy to meet with you and spend some time so that we can go over the problems that you perceive you're having, and leave it at that. So, there's and also something else that I think picks up on what Debbie was talking about. Keeping people informed internally of what you're doing. if you do good work, a lot of times the supervisors are going to know it. Someone may be stepping on your feet, but you know what? They're going to see what you can do. I've been a manager for many years, and I've trained a lot of new lawyers. And I'll tell you, it doesn't take you long to pick out who are the people that have really good skill sets and you can trust. And they're not the people after a while who'll step on people's shoes. You know not to trust those people, because if they basically throw rocks at the people below, they're gonna start removing the rungs of the ladder. So me as the manager, I'm gonna go tumbling. So it's very important that that people perceive what I'm doing, that I'm being candid with my supervisors and my coworkers, and a lot of times I don't respond directly to what's happening unless you want to take that person off to the side and say, I couldn't help but notice that you said this about me. Can we talk about this? It's important that you communicate in that regard.
Someone else came in with a question on that same issue. How do you respond to a partner that takes credit for an associate's accomplishments? And I think it's the same kind of thing. Having the willingness to have these not accusatory conversations, but just, it would really help me to be able to be part of that team and have such and such know that I, kind of came up with the theory of the case or of the negotiation, and that would mean a lot to me. Do you think we could, could I come to the next client meeting or, whatever it might be? But externally, Jim, also, I wanted to ask you, because I think this idea of communicating and letting people know what you're doing, it accomplishes something else that I think a lot of lawyers overlook, and that is the tripwire. Do you know what I'm getting at?
It relaxes the client. The client's anxieties fly out the window.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Here's the way to think about it. If I'm a lawyer, I've got a file cabinet of 100 files, 100 different client matters. And I probably in my mind say, okay, I'm going to apportion, importance to each and every file. Well, the client who has retained me, that's their only matter that they've gone to a lawyer for. That's everything for them. They're not one of 100, they're all. So sometimes just occasional status letters, or the minute they would call or email or something, just some sort of check back. And if you're too busy because you're in court or something's going on that you can't handle it, see if there's someone on your staff, if you're fortunate enough to have a staff, to say, oh, hi, she's busy right now, she's in court, can I find out what you need, and then I'll get right back to you. And sometimes it's something as innocuous as, oh, yeah, I just changed my phone, I have a different phone number to let you know about. Okay, we'll mark that in the files. It'll all be taken care of. But if that client doesn't come, it doesn't get that information back from the lawyer, they start getting anxiety ridden. They start worrying that my lawyer's neglecting my matter. So, basically, Kathy, when you're talking about keeping people informed, you're relaxing them. You're making it appear that you're on top of all things and you can make decisions. And don't worry about a thing. We're taking care of you.
That's such a big part of professional presence and confidence and communication. I want to move on and change the pace a little bit to the quick tips. But I noticed an audience question that asks how do you act confident so that others do not think that you're acting superior. And it's my experience, a lawyer that would ask that is aware of where the line might be and isn't the kind of personality that would act superior. So he or she won't be mistaken as seeming to be bragging or superior. It's the people that don't know that they might, be overdoing it, that, don't have that awareness. So if you're thinking about it, I think you're in good shape. And if you're not thinking about it, we ask, that you do. So let me, on that note, move along to the quick tips, because I just a quick thought on each of them, maybe to supplement what we've also been talking about. Debbie, I guess, is that your first tip? You want to kick this off?
Sure, yeah. So the first tip that I would have is to respond to communications in the manner you received them. And what I mean by this is that if you receive a phone call, respond with a phone call. An email, respond with an email. Don't send an email in response to a phone call. There's sort of an unspoken hierarchy in communications. At the top is face-to-face communications. Next level down is phone. Next level down is email. And at the very bottom is text messaging. And in the practice of law in particular, the closer you can get to the top of that hierarchy is typically better, because we're often communicating sensitive information and often want to make sure that tone can be heard. At the same time, people, when they communicate with you, especially if they are your bosses or your clients, they're giving you cues about their preferred method of communication in how they reach out to you. And it's wise to take that cue and respect their preferences, rather than saying to yourself, they called me, but I'd rather send them an email, so I'll send them an email in response. If they have called you, it's best then to respect that and respond their way by giving them a call back. And that will help ensure also that you don't fall into the trap of missing them or communicating in a way that they're not typically going to be responsive to, or that you annoy them or irritate them simply by being uncommunicative in their minds.
You know, your second tip there, I think, relates to a question we just had about, a very new associate finding it difficult to exude confidence and, knowing she has so much to learn. Can you give that second tip and quickly speak to that?
Sure. So the second tip is not being afraid to grow and develop and learn throughout your career. And I work with people at different levels in terms of experience in the practice of law. And those who are most successful at whether as a brand new lawyer or a very experienced lawyer are those who are open to continuing to learn and grow. And in terms of confidence and self-promotion, which I do believe is absolutely critical to success in the practice of law, it's uncomfortable for people at all levels. So while being effective at promoting yourself and telling people about what you do know can lead to promotions and partnership and client development and all sorts of positive opportunities, what you want to do is leverage what you do know. So if you're just starting out and you feel like there's a lot that maybe you have yet to learn, think about where you are competent. Think about the things that you have had success with and start small. Where you have a small victory, share it with a colleague, share it with a boss, share it with a client, and just begin to add to your set of accomplishments. And each time you have an accomplishment or a success, it's actually going to help fuel this feeling that you have that you do have confidence and competence to move forward. But know that no matter where you are in your career, there's going to be more to learn, more to develop in terms of particularly the soft sides of practicing law, even once you feel more competent in the technical aspects.
Thank you. I guess, Jim, you have a couple of quick tips here?
I have a couple of quick tips. And one thing I've learned over many years of dealing with seeing lawyers the subject of complaints is it's very vital that lawyers learn to immediately and really effectively address perceived client concerns. Now, this may be concerns voiced by the client about something that the lawyer has to really listen and see what the client's saying. But it's also the lawyer herself has to be in a position to say, I've got a problem with this client. The biggest example I can give, and I can't tell you how often this is proven to be a problem, is let's say I'm a lawyer in private practice, and I bill my clients on a monthly basis, and I send an invoice to my client. I can't tell you how many lawyers who send out that monthly invoice and they don't get paid. The next month they'll send another invoice, now having the new charges with the old. Nothing, no payment forthcoming. Third month, here's another bill. Fourth month, when the client stops paying, there's something up. You've got to say to yourself, I'm providing good and competent services. And, we had a contract for consideration of me doing good work. You're going to compensate me for that. If you don't immediately address those problems, they will fester. If you see the client saying something that's just wholly inappropriate, fraudulent, and criminal, you got to address it. So you can't stick your head in the sand is what I'm saying, and wait for the perfect time to address a tough issue. Sometimes you got to just say to yourself, I can do this matter-of-factly and professionally. I've got to address the topic.
Right, it's a trap and a tripwire to procrastinate. So.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Now, the last tip I would have is, and seize opportunities, small as well as great, and be a constant learner. What do I mean by that? Be early for meetings. Someone in management wants you to do something as long as it's not illegal or unethical. What's the problem doing it? Learn. This is going to sound strange because everyone likes their little art, Latin office, but try to keep a neat office, and I'll tell you why. I've had many situations where we've had lawyers call me and say, hey, I've got a pre-hearing in court, and guess what? I'm stuck on a train. The train's not moving. Can you run into court? Sure, where's your file? I go into their office, and it's like, oh, my gosh, we've descended into purgatory here. This is, what can anyone find? And pretty soon 3 secretaries and paralegals and myself are rummaging through things. So it's kind of like little things like, here's that image thing again. Learn how to use your assistants, too, in seizing opportunities. And also learn from the non-lawyer staff just as well as the lawyers. Sometimes the ones who know the environment better than anybody else are the people that deliver the mail, make the copies, and are typing pleadings.
And learning how to delegate when appropriate is,
that's right.
Or failing to delegate is another trap. All right. Well, I think these are great tips. I hope that our audience is getting concrete examples to use. And let's keep the pace up. Let's go to the agree-disagree moment. I think, Debbie, let me ask you, failing to network can be a professional trap. So many people hate networking, and, they keep their head down and want to do their work. Do you agree or disagree that if they don't network, they may be stepping into a trap?
I agree 1,000%. The lawyers who network get ahead professionally. They are better able to seek promotions. They're better able to seek new clients. They're better able to seek new jobs. And being in your office with your head down all the time, really avoiding getting out in the professional community or to industry functions, simply isolates you. It is critically important at the early stages of a lawyer's career for the lawyer to build technical competency, but that can't be at the cost of not developing a professional network as well. The great news is that some of your networking can actually be done from inside your office. Email allows us to communicate with lots of people and to follow up with people that we've met, follow up with speakers that we've seen, people that we admire, and certainly you can use LinkedIn, which is a wonderful networking tool that many lawyers and other professionals already use. But absolutely, failing to network is a professional trap, and for any lawyer who wants longevity in a legal career, getting out and building a network of contacts can be done in a way that's comfortable and is critical to success.
Jim, let me ask you, because Debbie mentioned getting in touch with people you admire. Do you agree or disagree that you ought to try to be like the lawyers that you admire?
Well, I disagree with that. And I'll tell you what, there's nothing, everyone needs a mentor, or hopefully will have a mentor in their careers. But I don't think people should parrot other people. I've taken depositions at big firms, and I love this. In walks the partner and 2 associates, all wearing the same shade of blue bow tie. I get a big smile on my face because there's not going to be a creative thought there anywhere. But no, the critical thing here is I think that you don't want to try to be like that lawyer because you're your own person. You want to be yourself. You want to learn from the person that you admire. You want to see how they think through a problem. You want to see how they analyze an issue. You want to see how they communicate to people about their analysis. That's what you should take away. So you learn how to handle issues and problems by observing them, but really, be honest, be yourself, and I think you'll find that life is much easier for you.
that reminds me of sort of another trap that, you need to guard against the trap of setting expectations that you cannot sustain. And some of that is, sort of getting ahead of your competence or trying to parrot, as you say, others. And, so we want you to communicate and affiliate and narrate and, grow. I think you're getting those senses from us today that those are where some of these real pitfalls that we don't often think about, might lie. You want to be building your technical competence, building your network. We're asking a lot of you, but we're trying to save you, from some of the missteps that a lot of us have already taken. So I guess it's time. Let me ask you about some of these takeaways, because we've covered a good number of the audience questions. So now let me ask you, who wants to talk about taking action as a takeaway?
I will. And taking action is something, as we've talked about, critically important. You want to be proactive in your career. Don't simply wait for things to happen to you. Regardless of whether you're new to the practice of law or very seasoned, you want to be taking positive action that influences the direction of your career path, asking for projects and cases, finding mentors, joining organizations, being seen out in the community as an expert and as a leader. And I always say it's your career, so you want to be in the driver's seat. If you set goals and create accountability and take action, that will lead you in the direction that you want to go.
Well, I guess one of the ways, Jim, to set goals and take action is your tip. Your takeaway. Sorry.
Right. If you're a solo, or let's say your firm, small, medium size, doesn't already have prototypes, try to develop a series of letters and retention agreements and things that you're going to use commonly in your practice to go out to prospective or current or past clients. And what this will do is with these various writings and letters in plain language, clearly establish what duties and responsibilities exist, non-retention letters, end-of-task letters, status correspondence. It really goes a long way to dealing with those problems we were initially discussing about communication. It really minimizes malpractice claims and disciplinary grievances.
Okay, I think maybe you have the next takeaway.
I've got the next one, and don't laugh at this, but at some time in people's lives they will be in sole practice. And people ask me questions, and I say, I can give you my point of view, but have you asked your malpractice carrier about this? What? Can I ask them something? Yes. They're happy to talk to you. For example, how long do I keep my files? How should we handle referral fees? If you have a policy of malpractice insurance, check about the risk management services that are offered and utilize them. Most insurance companies have wonderful services.
That's a great takeaway. Debbie, we had that question about, well, what do you mean by professional presence? And I think your final tip, is maybe speaks to that.
Yes. So one thing I think is important about professional presence is remembering that it's all about how people perceive you, not how you perceive yourself, but how others perceive you. So the first thing I would suggest is to think about and make a list of the adjectives that you would want people to use as they describe you. And then get some feedback. How do people actually perceive you? And from there, you can take action to close the gap between the perceptions that other people hold about you and how you want to be perceived by people out in the community. And this will help you guard against some of the traps that we've been discussing today related to your professional presence, related to how you communicate, and to the confidence, the image of confidence that you portray in the professional community as a lawyer. But understanding that professional presence and really analyzing how you come across is going to be critical to your professional success.
It's so true. And we have all these online profiles. We were talking about using LinkedIn and noticing how other people create their profiles and what persona they're trying to project. Maybe some people have a professional Facebook profile. I think fewer lawyers have that, but I think it's something to, explore if you do want to. There's certainly, the possibility of that. And how do you get real feedback about how others perceive you? Somebody just asked that, and we'll sort of say as the last question, there's nothing, wrong with direct communication. By going to a mentor, by going to a supervisor, by going to someone in the Bar Association that you saw speak, to get some to ask them.
Right.
I hope that I'm seen as trustworthy, but there's so many components to that. What have you noticed about me that shows you that, I know how important the assignments are you give me or the matters that I handle for you? What is it that I'm doing well? What could I be doing differently? And I think that's really the only way is to seek that feedback, and advisedly so. So let me close. You guys have been terrific, as I knew you would be. Let me close. I want to thank Debby Stone and Jim Grogan for sharing so much expertise. I want to remind the people on the line that the ABA has resources. You have resources within your own organizations. If you feel there are blurred lines on ethics issues, someone asked about that. There are hotlines you can call. As Jim mentioned, the risk management resources. We want you to don't be shy about seeking out and finding out about resources because they are ubiquitous. And I mentioned the ABA page that has some materials on it and tells you about the programs that we do here on the second Friday of each month. That's the www.ambar.org/advice. And next month, our program is going to be on delivering difficult information, bad news. Even if those you're delivering it to are difficult, it's a knotty situation, and you can go right into this page and register now. And know that going forward, we're going to be calling these programs career advice, not because they're not always live. We see a lot of people going in to archive take the archived information. So we just are going to continue on June 13th. And hope to have as many of you with us as possible. So thanks for being with us today. Let me close by saying on behalf of the ABA, I'm Kathy Morris. I thank all of you tremendously, and please wait for the evaluation to come up on your screen before you leave us. We need your thoughts and input, and hope to see you again on the second Friday of next month. Thank you all.